This moment of nerd is brought to you by the public library. The public library, the only place nerds hang out since Radio Shack closed. Hi there, and welcome to Hav and Charles Talk Comics. I'm Charles, and I'm here with my friend Hav. Well, a couple of miles away from Hav, but I can see him here on FaceTime. Hi, Hav. How you doing?
Hey, Charles. How are you?
And he's waving at me and yelling into his microphone. Oh, it's going to be fun.
Does this microphone thing work? Is this thing on?
We had a little technical difficulties. We were supposed to start at 8:30, and then I was late getting everything started, and then Hav got on promptly when I contacted him, but his mic decided not to work. So...
Yeah, there was exploration of settings and microphones and USB stuff and all sorts. Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah. And we're also one of us, and I'm beginning to wonder if it's me or him, but we'll never know, is having internet connection difficulties. That's going to... So at the end of this podcast, if y'all are listening and you're enjoying it, there seems to be some choppy edits. It's not the editor. The editor is awesome. The editor's not awesome. But still, it might get a little choppy because we might drop here and there, and I will do my best to make it seem seamless, but I will fail. I know I will. So today we are going to talk about two comics that could not be more different from each other. Well, they could be. They could be much more different from each other because they are both comic books, so they have something in common. But Hav suggested that I read the first four comics of the Doom Patrol arc that Grant Morrison did. And I suggested to him that he read the first volume of Why the Last Man. And I suggested that because on September 13th, which if you're listening to this on the day it drops, was Monday, that new show based on that comic by, I think it's Brian Vaughan, comes out on Hulu. And I think FX as well. So we're going to do what we normally do and begin talking about Hav's comic. Because generally we go chronological, and he always does older stuff than I do.
So far, yes, that has been absolutely true. And like you said, this is when the great Grant Morrison started what turned out to be a really cool run on Doom Patrol, which had already started in the late 80s, and he took over, and his first issue was number 19 of Volume 2, or the second series of Doom Patrol, which came out in March of the 1989. Before that, Paul Kupperberg had been the writer and had rebooted it and done a bunch of things. Sales were waning, and DC decided to shake it up and essentially give Grant Morrison carte blanche and just said, do it to it. And he went some interesting directions. And this shows kind of a preview, I think, these first few issues of his long run on that series of just kind of the weird, I think, cool stuff he did. Thoughts, comments, Charles? What'd you think of what you saw, which, like I said, was pretty short? I asked you like 5 times, hey, we're just doing the first 4 issues because it's not much, but go ahead.
Well, I think it was a very important 4 issues in the arc. And I will say I had, when I borrowed that, Doom Patrol, it ended up putting me about halfway through it because a few months ago I had already borrowed that from Hoopla, and I'd read a bunch of it. It hadn't really stuck with me anything about it because I will be perfectly upfront, it's really not for me comic-wise. However, I read the first 4 again, and I read it through a new lens. First off, I read a lot of the opening that Grant Morrison wrote, and then I did a little research taking what Hav had mentioned in our last podcast, that Grant Morrison had come out as non-binary queer. And I read it through the lens knowing that about them. And it really, really opened my eyes on what they were doing when they wrote it. Because as he put it when he came out and announced that is who they are, he said when he was younger there were not words for it, and now there are. Or there was no terminology, and I thought that meant a lot. So a lot of what was going on, I thought, with Larry Trainer and the Negative Man and the Doctor morphing into one being came from a very personal place for him. Now, I may be wrong. I may be being an armchair psychologist here, and I don't. I was just. It made this comic more meaningful to me knowing that about the author.
That makes a lot of sense. And I did not read the stuff in the volume I have or online. I just really read the 4 issues. But that does make a lot of sense that they would do that given them coming out as non-binary. And I think how big of a deal that was. And you're right. Now reading this and you're referencing Trainer, Larry Trainer's character, Negative Man previously, now Rebus in this incarnation, because very early on in this arc, he's without the I forget what they call it, the negative part of the the ghost-like figure that comes back to visit him, and then that merges him, the negative part, and the Doctor that was treating him post what had just happened previously in the series. Am I encapsulating that right? Synopsizing that right?
Yes, it happens very early.
And I guess you mentioned just a second ago, Charles, you said that this was not for you when you first started reading it back however long ago that was. Absent, back then, without knowing what you know now, why wasn't it for you? Why was that?
It just wasn't appealing to me that much. There was too much mystical stuff, and a lot of times when they run into the mystical stuff, if they pull it off and it's deep and meaningful, okay, I can get into it. The whole point of this was it wasn't deep and meaningful, which I did like on the second time through. I really liked that, but the silliness just kind of made me roll my eyes a little bit. That was all. It's just not my kind of comic. I don't know how else to put it. I might actually, this will sound silly, I might actually have really enjoyed it more if this was an actual novel instead of a graphic type novel.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so a couple things that I think bear mentioning. When you said it wasn't deep, there's all sorts of surrealistic. Some people have used the word. I saw something in some commentary, Dada, and just absurdist, I think, stuff. And yeah, in this one, the big bad guys are the scissormen, which are cutting people out of reality while a fictional reality invades the Doom Patrol Earth. At one point, they just show this big splash page of Kansas City, and they said something like, Kansas City is a mess, because there's just all sorts of weirdness going on from this fictional place that I think we find out some writers just came up with, and somehow it came to life, and there's not really a lot of explanation as to why or how, but it happens.
Yes. Yeah, and it all comes down to asking the two rulers of this world, and it's all based on the logic question. If you have two doors and there's a person in front of each door, and one door leads to safety and one door leads to death, or you're running down a path. It's been many ways. The one I always use is here is if you're running down a path and you're coming to a crossroad, and there is a member of a tribe standing at the crossroad, and there are two separate tribes that live in this area. They look exactly alike. One always lies. One always tells the truth. The one that always lies will, if you go to their village, they will kill you. The one that always tells the truth, if you go to their village, will let you live. And you're running, and you have to take one path. One leads to one village, one leads to the other. There's one person. You have time to ask one question as you're going. What question do you ask?
Yeah, I don't remember what the question was. That is it Larry Trainer or at that point Rebus asks.
The
what was it?
The question they ask is, what was it exactly? Oh, that's gonna kill me. All right, now I gotta look it up. I'm sorry. I gotta get it right.
That's what I'm doing too.
Oh, you have the book there.
Yeah, but it's going to take me a second.
Okay. Well, I told you the problem with part of this is I can't really get on my iPad as much when we're doing this the way we are. So we're racing. This is more riveting podcast. Old tech versus new tech. Why is there something instead of nothing? I've come to ask the question,
Yeah.
why is there something instead of nothing?
Yes.
So it's a liar and an honest man.
Yes. And then one of them says there is something instead of nothing. And then he says, then you can't possibly exist. And boom, everything goes away. And I wanted to point out that two-door, one always tells the truth to the question, one always lies when asked the same question. If memory serves, classically used, not classically, I'm not sure why I'm using that descriptor, used in the movie Labyrinth. Isn't there a part in Labyrinth where there's that?
And she
there's
gets it
that.
wrong.
Well, sure. I'm not great on the logic games, so I would probably choose poorly. But, so yeah. Also, I do want to point out, because I do have the wherewithal to use the Wikipedia, you mentioned that Why the Last Man is starting, when did you say?
September 13th.
September 13th. The third season for the HBO Max series Doom Patrol, which borrows heavily on Grant Morrison's run, is set to premiere on HBO Max on September 23rd.
Oh, very cool.
So, coincidence that I did not know until I just looked it up on the Wikipedia.
Oh, and I would like to give a correction from our last episode. We got lots of emails about this. Actually, we got no emails about this, but that's okay. We never get any emails. We whined about that in the last episode. If y'all were on the ball, you could have pointed out that the TV show I was looking for was not Young Justice. It was Titans. Titans was what I was trying to say in the last episode of our podcast. And
it says, oh, go ahead. You broke up there for a second.
I know.
Go ahead.
Titans was what I was talking about, and not Young Justice. And I don't even remember what it was, but I was like, oh my gosh, because it was the Teen Titans, and then I was like, no, but it's Young Justice, and yeah. So my brain no works.
You're talking about the live action show Titans.
Yeah, the live action show Titans. Correct.
Okay.
That's why I was talking about Robin and the other people, and that's where Doom Patrol, the TV show, originally had its backdoor pilot in, because the Doom Patrol was in the first few episodes, and that's where Animal Man ended up part of Titans. Also,
correct.
Animal Man is where Grant Morrison had one of his best runs at DC, and also,
and just and not to be picky but the proper pronoun is there. Runs.
Sorry?
Just so you know,
that is correct.
That's okay. It's hard to get used to.
Yes, and they also made themselves a character in DC Comics, which another writer brought back in one of the Crisis and killed.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes.
Interesting. And your Animal Man, different than Beast Boy, though. Beast Boy is who was in...
You're right, see? And correct.
Okay.
I can't believe I made a mistake in the corrections part of our podcast.
That is something to behold. And, by the way, maybe we can give out a no prize a la Stan Lee and Marvel. If somebody were to email us and point out all the many, lies we tell during the podcast, and they can email
mistakes.
us at
Mistakes.
or mistakes.
We're not lying. We're fucking up.
Oh. Well, what's the email where they can send it so that we get to see it?
Hav and Charles Talk Comics at gmail.com.
There you go. So, yeah. What else to mention? But he's talking about the Doom Patrol TV show. I've seen some things from some of the actors. For example, the actress Diane Guerrero that plays Jane, Crazy Jane, was on some social media thing. I don't think it was Twitter, but that's where I saw it. She picked up the huge omnibus of Grant Morrison's run and said, "This is our Bible for the TV show. This is where we go to find out where all this is coming from." Which I thought was pretty cool.
It makes a lot of sense, especially coming from her, because that character that arrives in that first comic. Crazy Jane arrives in that first comic, and everything from the TV show is in those first four. Everything about Crazy Jane that we've learned in 2 seasons of Doom Patrol is in those first 4 episodes. So those first 4 issues are 2 seasons of episodes is everything we know about. See, I'm just showing off now. because I'm gonna screw that up later in the thing, and you're gonna get all excited. So everything about Crazy Jane that we've even seen is in 4 issues of that comic, and it's amazing because you have Hammerhead, you have Flit, you have the Underground, you have the train driver, you have the. It was really cool. I will say I did enjoy these 4, and it wasn't just because of learning about Grant Morrison. It's just the whole Doom Patrol thing as a comic. I just felt no desire to keep going. That's it.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, and it does go to the whole outsider not fitting in. These are all bizarre, even by comic book standards. Crazy Jane, by the way, in case you haven't seen the Doom Patrol TV show, she has powers. She's got 60-something personalities, each with their own set of powers, and that only one's in charge of her physically at any given time. They change out as needed, it seems to be, when certain powers are needed a lot of times. She suffers from dissociative disorder, multiple personality disorder. Even the first time she meets Robot Man, they rip that off. Her painting in the rain, her painting outside when she meets Robot Man for the first time, they use in the show where they first meet each other in the TV show, which again I just think is cool that they did that. Absent. Oh, good.
I liked Robot Man in this. Everything about him in this one was great, and I think they took directly from this beginning to really structure him. So no, I absolutely what the actress you mentioned said, they did just wisely. There is so much that you can build upon from here. And if you read further in, you get into the street, whose name I can't remember. I did remember that. Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe I did enjoy this more than I thought I did the first time I read through it. I wonder why I quit reading.
Is it Johnny the Street?
I
am I blanking on
remember. I can't remember. But he in the
Danny the Street. Danny the Street.
In the TV show, he is one of my all-time favorite characters, possibly in anything. A sentient street that's, again, I believe, transsexual.
Right. And is a haven for outcasts, oddballs, persons that don't fit in maybe in regular polite society, however you want to talk about it. And again, going back to what you're saying about where Grant Morrison was coming from, maybe that's why they were so attracted to this property, especially because I did make this note. When he took over, DC not only said, here, apparently do whatever you want to, they also stopped submitting it to the Comic Book Code Authority for approval. So there was no having to worry about them not putting the stamp of approval, the little CCA thing in the corner of the cover. I thought that was interesting to note.
Well, you can clearly see what I think of that Code of Authority thing. Just looking at our logo.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Good point. Ooh, nice there, that thing you did with the
Synergy.
Going to something else.
Synergy.
Yeah. What else? So yeah, Robot Man, has, he's brain in a robot, not being able to feel, like physically feel anything, and going through all that, that's there. You had the Negative Man, Larry Trainer, Mergen. You don't have Elastigirl. She's apparently left the team at this point, although I think she comes back. There you go. That's right. If there's some bad brouhaha, she's out of commission. One
of the things that they also did to bring him in was they had the last writer kind of clear the boards.
Right.
So she's in a coma. The Robot Man has checked himself into a insane asylum because he just can't handle what he's doing, what's going on with himself. That's where we first see this Scissorman, and that's why he meets Crazy Jane, because she is in an asylum. Because she's crazy in all the delightful ways. Or actually, horrifying ways. So she's in an asylum. Oh, I had somewhere where I was going with this. Well, I guess we'll just move on.
Well, I was going to say also this run, the writer that originally came up with, created Doom Patrol is this gentleman named Arnold Drake, born in 1924. I'm looking at his Wikipedia page. I'm not. This is an all encyclopedic memory or anything. There was a nice comment that he made apparently towards the end of his life because he passed away in 2007 that he did appreciate and very much like Grant Morrison's take because he felt like it was the most true to the comic book, the original comic book, and the just wackiness off the wall nature of where they could go and these types of characters. So
That is very
I thought
nice.
that was neat.
Yeah. But what I was trying to say is they cleared the board. They set it up so he could reassemble the team. That was where I was going with it. So, excuse me, Grant Morrison, could assemble the team the way they wanted it to be. In the bit I read for the Hoopla graphic novel that I had that he'd written a forward to, they said that they came up with almost everything that they wrote in a week period of brainstorming. It just came to them in a bolt and bang, and
Wow.
had everything they needed to write all of this. So that is really kind of cool.
It's amazing because it's not a short run that they had on this comic book.
No, it's not.
Well, speaking of clearing the board, I did read this one tidbit also. I did not read anything on the forward, but I was just kind of looking up stuff. While clearing the board, there was a shot of a character in a background of an ape-faced little girl that Grant Morrison took up, and eventually he uses in his run. That's this ape-faced little girl named Dorothy that plays a prominent role in the TV show, and then eventually in his run on Doom Patrol.
Yeah, all of season 2.
Yeah,
Dorothy is slightly important to season 2.
correct.
No spoiler for something that came out last year.
Yeah, it's been out for a little bit. If you haven't read it yet, that's kind of on you. I
Haven't read the TV show that came out last year?
or I haven't
Was
haven't
that-
read all the episodes.
Did you kind of mess
yeah.
that like I did? Okay,
I-
good. I just
I
wanted
did.
Yeah. I was
I
talking-
sure did.
I was talking about season 2 of the TV show, the episodes.
Correct. You got me.
This has been
was
another
it?
edition of Corrections on Hav & Charles Talk Comics. Corrections, brought to you by the Public Library. Their mistakes are free too, yo.
One other note I had before, because it was a cool run. It's 4 issues. It's a pretty quick read. I feel like I think you agree. It's a pretty good introduction to Grant Morrison's run. The original creator, though, Arnold Drake, Doom Patrol came out apparently shortly before X-Men. And outcasts, and the leader's in a wheelchair. A lot of people have insinuated or just flat out said that Stan Lee ripped off Charles Xavier and the X-Men from Doom Patrol. Then I remember back way when it was, which one really came out first because of, writing and publication dates. But I think it's established now that Doom Patrol was first and X-Men, which eventually became Uncanny X-Men, shortly after. Arnold Drake at one point in time was kind of riding that wave, saying, he must have ripped me off because look at Charles Xavier. But then again, towards the end of his life, said, you know what? Two people can have similar ideas that go completely different directions. And besides the outcasts and oddball aspect of it and a leader in a wheelchair, pretty different, I think, where these two were at, especially in the 80s, when this comes out.
Oh, and they were different then too, because the type of outcast they were. They created the mutant thing was a whole thing, and it was a group of basically teenagers. Whereas with Doom Patrol, it was a group of adult freaks that had something going wrong with them, if I remember correctly. The closest thing to they're very similar is they were both in wheelchairs. But Xavier's
Right.
bald, man. He's bald. That's completely different. A bald man in a wheelchair is completely different from a bearded man in a wheelchair. Come on, man.
Well, and I don't think Professor Calder has any powers that I recall either in the comic book or in the show. Mm-hmm. So there's that. One other thing that the show borrows on that eventually comes out in the comic book very later on, like in issues like 30, 40, or 50 something that they use point blank in the show is that Calder helped create these people, helped them get their powers, and created the circumstances that gave them their powers for better or worse, and usually worse.
Hmm.
And that, of course, becomes an issue
Well, I mean,
because
he did make Robot Man.
right,
So
right.
that's let the dude die. I have his brain. I can put it in this. Yeah. Okay. Maybe let me die. Or why can't I just be in a jar? I mean, brain in a jar. Why isn't that? Well, I guess Robot Man's better, but still. Wow.
Yeah.
You're thinking of a way to put my dead brain in a jar now, you bastard.
Well, I'm just wondering, like, would it be like a potato that maybe it'll start growing if I put it in some water?
No, but it
You
will.
know?
It like a potato. If you stick electrodes into it, it will run a clock.
Nice. Nice.
Science, yo.
Uh, okay. I liked it, and I'm glad that you enjoyed it more so maybe this time, given learning more about the author. And we didn't even mention the artist, by the way, which is my bad. But
I never
uh-oh.
mentioned the artist. We had this conversation last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of artists on this run, and I don't remember who the primary artist was on these first 4 issues, but I feel like trying to give them some due, which was Richard Case and Carlos Garzon
Okay.
on these first few issues, I believe.
I like the art
Yeah,
in
I
it.
did too.
I thought it worked really well.
Yes, you get scissormen, you get fictional reality trying to take over reality and putting people in a non-reality, and it's
Let,
just a fun ride.
let's talk about the Scissorman because I had to do some research.
I did not, please.
Okay, so the reason I did research on Scissormen is there's an author who is one of my all-time favorite authors named Terry Pratchett. He writes books, Hav. You wouldn't understand. He passed away sadly recently, not recently, a few years ago. It was early onset Alzheimer's, and it kind of sucks when you lose one of your favorite authors because you don't get to read his books anymore. Then it sucks when anybody dies. In one of his books called The Hogfather, he had a character appear. The whole premise of that book was someone had killed their version of Santa Claus, which was the Hogfather, which meant all of this belief was out there because belief is a real thing and it can create gods. So at that point, anybody could create really any god. And a child was talking about the Scissor Man, that's when you sucked your thumb as their kids. He was told that the Scissor Man came and cut off their thumbs. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I thought that was something Terry Pratchett had come up with. But the fact that Grant Morrison, Terry Pratchett is an Englishman. Grant Morrison, they're Scottish, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. Made me think, wait a minute. That's two UK type people that have mentioned the Scissor Man, so I decided to look up the Scissor Man, and it was based on a German illustrated book of children's stories, and the Scissor Man was one of them. And I was reading this, and it is considered, and this was in the 1800s, it was considered one of the first graphic stories, basically like a first comic book. And the reason he did it was he wanted to buy his child a picture story book as a gift and could not find one, so he made one. I'm not going to get into more of them, but I would not give any kid I was associated with this thing. It sounds horrible.
Well, you're talking about just European, folk tales for kids are always seemingly very, very freaking dark, right? You get,
oh my gosh, yes.
You got apparently did they cut off some body part of a kid for sucking their thumb in that
Yes,
1800s thing?
Thumbs. They cut off their thumbs.
Yeah.
Apparently, the story was the doctor that the child was told by their parent to stop sucking their thumb or something bad would happen. And then the parent left and the child stayed at home and sucked his thumb. So an errant tailor broke into their house and cut off his thumbs. There is a picture in the article of a scissor man with the red legs and the giant scissors. Not like the scary ones, but that one picture that is literally from an illustration that was in an English translated version of this book. So they kind of lifted that and put it in there. If my Google searches worked correctly, or they just drew it like it was just I was horrified. I'm like, oh my Lord, the Scissor Man. I've been sucking my thumb almost nonstop since then.
There you go. And now you know what's going to happen tonight after we're done with the podcast. I hope you're happy. And
ladies
hey,
and gentlemen, if my thumbs are cut off, please tell the police it was Hav.
what? Huh?
I mean,
what?
my Lord.
The Grimm fairy tales are the original iterations of them, from my understanding, not that I've heard or I've read stuff about, they're just freaking dark. They're just dark. The whole kids, getting put in the oven, and now that's about the depth of my knowledge right now of Grimm fairy tales, but just really dark stuff. If you go back and apparently get into the original quote unquote fairy tales.
This has been a Literary Minute by Hav. A Literary Minute by Hav, brought to you by the Public Library.
And that's why you should read, boys and girls. Maybe read more than comic books. Maybe. I'm not saying I do, but you should. Do as I say, not as I do.
Hav, what do you think about Grimm's fairy tales? I've heard they were bad. Okay, thanks, Hav.
Yeah, they're too dark. But let me tell you about this comic book where there's these scissormen. Now, that is really interesting. I had no idea. I did not even think to Googleize that. I'm glad you did, because I think that's really interesting.
It was only because it's not the first time I had heard of the Scissormen.
There you go.
I have heard of the Scissor Women, and go ahead and Google that. Everyone at home, Google that. You're welcome.
I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
That's what she said.
There you go.
So I'm glad we both enjoyed that, and I may have to go ahead and read more of that. So the book I suggested was Why the Last Man, because as I've mentioned on a couple of pods, I saw that it was coming out on Hulu. I had never really heard about it. I had thought I'd seen something about it, and I immediately I watched the trailer, and I was like, huh. And then I grabbed the first graphic novel, ran through it, and then ran through all 10 volumes. And by run through,
wow.
I got through them in about, 2 days.
Really?
Yeah, they're comic books.
Yeah, because there's 60. No, there's 60. No, but I mean that takes some dedication. There's 60 issues in the full series.
They're picture books, Hav.
Okay, I get it. You look down on comic books. It's weird that you're doing a podcast about them.
I don't look down on comic books. I love comic books. They just don't take that long to read.
No, they really don't.
Especially not when you're really into it. If you're really
when they're
intrigued
good
by it, you sit down and you just want to go, okay, I want to know what's next. I want to know what's next. I want to know what's next. It's the same way if you get a really good novel that you're really into, you read it in a day.
Yeah, or a day and a night, because I just remember the first time I read The Shining in high school, late middle school, early high school. Scared the crap out of me, but just got through that, and it started it after school one day and then stayed up pretty much all night till got done late that night, early the next morning. So yeah, absolutely. I don't blame you. I had read a fair amount of the series, but I didn't get through the end. I bowed out somewhere in the 20s or 30 issue range, which is probably stupid on my part, because it's good. I need to finish it now that I know that it's on the Hoopla, and also be curious to see how it compares and contrasts with the show that's coming out on Hulu FX. So the premise is, if I may, that you have young Yorick, who is I guess amateur, because I don't think he's professional. He's an escape artist magician who's out of work. His mom is a U.S. representative. His girlfriend, who he wants to propose to and kind of does, is in Australia. And then all of a sudden, all the guys of every species, including humans, dies. Except for Yorick, his monkey, Ampersand, and I think you find out later some other dude. But way down the line, or further into the comic.
Massive spoiler. That takes a long time to get there.
Sorry. This did come out in 2002, so...
I know, but I mean, come on, dude.
There's that.
We only
okay.
read this. We're not going to talk about the end. I mean, what is with you in this? You're like, hey, we're going to talk about this, and it's a show, and it's a mystery, and the main character was actually the murderer. Now let's discuss the show. I mean, Bill.
Hey, Darth Vader was Luke's dad. Okay? All right? Just so everybody knows.
Can we start discussing the trilogy before you... We're going to talk about the Star Wars trilogy in which Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's dad and Leia is Luke Skywalker's sister.
And they mug down.
And they do. And
Obi-Wan Kenobi's a freaking liar.
Yes.
That's my takeaway.
From a certain point
freaking
of view.
Lied to his face.
And the point of view is you're a damn liar. The other point of view is that when the first movie came out, Darth Vader was not Luke Skywalker's father. Princess Leia was not the twin brother of Luke Skywalker. And I love how George Lucas often, this is amusing. I'm going to segue in a segue. It's taken us a while, but God, we've come back to our one true love. Anyway, he even kind of hems and haws. Oh yeah, I've always meant for it to be that way, and yeah, that it was. No, it wasn't. We watched the movie. They weren't. I'm sorry. Yeah. You ramrodded some stuff in there. It was pure beautiful comic book. Star Wars is beautiful comic booky stuff, and I do think at one point I'm going to have you read The Star Wars, which is a Marvel comic that came out that was based on his original kind of where he was going with it. And it is not great, and I absolutely loved it so much I've read it twice. And it's on Marvel Unlimited. So we'll probably read that at some point. That's not we're gonna should I switch that? No, I'm not gonna have you read that for the next time. I know what I'm gonna have you read.
But different than the ongoing Marvel comic book that came out shortly after A New Hope.
Oh yeah.
Now known as A New Hope.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it is a completely different thing. It's completely different characters. It was based on some of the original work he did while creating Star Wars.
Gotcha.
And since you and I are old enough to just call Episode 1 is Star Wars, because when I saw it up until we were in our 30s, it was Star Wars, Empire, and Return of the Jedi. Then they came out with the other ones, and they're like, oh no, it's called A New Hope. It's like, okay, that's fine, and I'll call it A New Hope when people want to get pedantic about it. But we all knew back then if we were talking about Star Wars, we meant Episode 4. If we were talking about Empire, we said Empire. If we were talking about Return of the Jedi, we said Jedi.
Yeah.
This moment of nerd is brought to you by the Public Library. The Public Library, the only place nerds hang out since Radio Shack closed.
Okay, sure, I'll go with that.
All right, why the last man?
Yeah, and by the way, not why the last man like the bad joke you made before we got on the podcast. Why like the letter Y, as in Yorick, the last man. Not why the last man? Question mark? No, not
really?
WHY.
Hold on. Why is it why the last man?
I was guessing because his name is Yorick.
You were okay. So
or chromosome Y, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, I think it's the chromosome.
Okay, well, his name happens to start with a Y also, and he happens to be, at this point in time, the last man, so there's that, too.
That's true. You know what? And I will not. Maybe that is it's probably a double meaning now that you mention it. Now, I'm sorry I jumped on you to dunk on you, because I never thought about it being Yorick, the last man. I just thought about it being Y, as in the chromosome. And since you've already pointed out he's not the last man...
Again, that you find out apparently really far into the series. So my bad. But for a long time he is. And, okay, so getting back to the comic, I did enjoy it. It's also oddly timely because in some ways this is a weird pandemic that's obviously struck men way worse than women, and in society.
You think it struck them way worse than women? I mean, there are 2 males left, as far as we know in this first Earth. There are 2 males of any species, 1 human and 1 monkey in the entire. But it's worse on men than women.
A little bit, little worse.
Yeah.
Death rate's a little higher. For males, apparently.
99.99999.
Keep on going.
Yeah, put the line over it.
Yeah, because they're all dead, and you get these weird factions that you get to see in these first 6 issues. First, you get the Democratic senators and representatives have just started sitting in the White House, and you get the widows of the Republican congressmen, because they were men that died because of this. And there's just a weird confrontation apparently in the front lawn of the White House that gets pretty ugly pretty fast until eventually the secretary the had been was the Secretary of Agriculture, a woman, a Republican, shows
Bush's
up.
Secretary of Agriculture. That's how far it went down for the new president of the United States, because everyone in the Bush administration was a man. They were like, and I was very pissed off. Okay, I have to say something about this going in because I really did enjoy it. Some of the things I did not enjoy about it, and I want to call it dated, but it took place after 9/11. So how
Yeah.
dated is it? But the abject collapsing of the world that they did in this because it was women that took over, I kind of don't buy as much. It would be bad, don't get me wrong, but oh no, no one knows how to make food, and no one can keep the electricity on, and the phone lines don't work because women's can't do that. I mean, it became a dystopian hellscape in an instant with no power, and no one had the knowledge to do any of that stuff. That's ridiculous. Anyway, that was my soapbox. That was my one flaw. And I'm going to be curious that here we are a number of years later to see if how they go that route and if it's going to be as bad for as long. Now, that could also just be the beginning, because it would cause some huge problems if half the population died, even if it was just... I just felt that some of this was there was a lot of hand ringing of the women. Oh, and how can we possibly do all of this without the men and what have you? It bothered me. If you get deeper into it, it was a little better in some places because, I mean, you go out into any rural area and ain't nothing going to change because the women are doing all the work the men are.
Had not thought of that at all. It just thought that when half the population in this situation, with whatever causes this to happen in this world, if half the population dies, it's going to get shitty really fast. And just people in general, men, women, whoever, people are shitty. People do weird stuff when there's a power vacuum. And speaking of, you also get the Amazons. The Amazons are a group of women that apparently are pretty okay with there being no more men. And if they were to get their hands on York, they would make sure goes the way of the dodo as well. Is what I take away from it.
A matter of fact, when they find out, they start pursuing him.
Right.
They want to find and kill him. Going back to Hav talking about the front lawn of the White House, what happened there is York had finally made his way from New York, right? He was in New York. He had made his way
Correct.
from New York to Washington, D.C., and found his mom living in the White House. While they're there, gunshots are fired into the room that they're in the White House, and she drags him downstairs and locks him in a vault and goes out to confront the wives of Republican congresspeople who are demanding at gunpoint that they be given their husbands' seats because so many women, they're quoting the fact that 48, I don't even know if it's a fact, it was a fact in this universe, I don't know if it's true, that 48 congressmen have died and their wives have run and been elected.
Every time.
And that means they should get it. And Yorick's mother is pointing out, but they were elected. And they're claiming, well, you're just trying to seize power just because you're in and we should get this. You're trying to wipe us out and this is your way to do it. And then you are correct. That's when the Republican agricultural now president comes in. Well, comes in not quite so, because a gun goes off and kills the hostage Secret Service agent because one of these women is holding a gun that evidently, again, I don't know, Republican congressmen's wives all of a sudden in this reality can't use guns?
Right.
I think if a Republican congressman's wife read this, she would be very offended because I'm pretty sure there's mandatory gun training for every Republican wife, child, congressperson's wife, child, etc. in America. I think that's just a rule in the Republican Party. But anyway, accidentally kills someone and then is killed by a Secret Service agent because that's what happens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the
What?
president then steps in, who's been wishy-washy about being a president, because when she's found by the member of the Culper ring, 355, is that her number?
Correct.
355 finds her. She says, oh, no, I'm just this farm woman. I can't be the president. That bothered me, too. You're a politician. Politicians tend to step up. Somebody has to do it. That bugged me. Again,
Yeah.
some of that, the way some of the women responded bugged me.
Well, speaking of the woman that is Agent 355 of the Culper Ring, which I thought was a cool historical callback, which goes all the way back to the American Revolutionary War. George Washington famously had a ring of spies at the time, the colonies, cities that were held by the British that would give him information, and that was the Culper Ring. There was actually a pretty it played loose and fast with the actual facts and historical facts, but there was a cool show on History Channel or AMC, I forget what it was, that was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it immensely. But I thought that was a cool thing that the Culper Ring, unbeknownst to everybody, is still around, and Agent 355 was a part of that. And I think she was the agent that was in play there on the White House lawn when all that went down. So, like I said, just a cool historical thing, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at that point, that's where the president is introduced to Yorick, and they realize that they have to do something. Now, this whole time, Yorick, what he wants to do is go to Australia because that's where his girlfriend is. Or as he says, his fiancée, because he was in the midst of asking his girlfriend to marry him over the phone while she's in Australia, and then all the other men in the world die and the phone lines instantly go out.
Yeah, because that makes sense.
Well, if there is not a man alive to keep it running, they're going to go out immediately.
Well, yeah, because who's going to be, cranking the thing on the thing that keeps all the phones running?
I mean, I don't even know that much about phones, but I gotta figure it's going to be able to run a short amount of time without men being alive. Testosterone makes the world go round. I mean, clearly, this is what this is saying.
You know what? Until you mentioned all this, I was just thinking, okay, yeah, there's this dystopian reality because of this. But you're pointing out some good points here. That why would the phones just completely everything go dead right away?
Why couldn't they get the power back on?
Yeah. Okay.
There are women that know how to do that.
Good point.
That's all. I'm just saying that there are women in positions where they know how to do these things, and they can bring other women in and teach them how to do these things. Now, some of that will take time, but in emergency situations, you can teach people and get things going.
Well, maybe the women were too busy organizing as the Amazons and getting the women that are part of the Amazons to burn off one of their breasts.
Yes.
And they say that's a thing because the Amazonian women would do that so they could shoot bows and arrows better, and that's why these women are doing it. And again, speaking of weird plot devices or maybe holes, why would women, because all the men are dead, say, you know what, Amazons, good idea. How do I burn my breast off? And which one, left or right? I'm righty. So does that mean I do the
well, yeah,
left?
See, that's the real question. Yeah, is it... It's the right. I would think it's the right breast for right-handed people because that's how they draw their bow. Hav and I are both, by the way. Hav and I are both drawing bows. I can see him doing it. He's not looking at me, but he and I are literally both drawing our bow on our because we are dorks, massive dorks.
So that okay.
Hold on. I want to go back to Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett, I know this is, I apologize, but Terry Pratchett had a book called Monstrous Regiment. It was about a group of young women that joined the army. Unbeknownst to the men, they join as men. And at one point in it, their lieutenant finds out, and he talks about the Discworld's and the women warriors, they're Amazon people, and they cut off their whatsits, and he's all aflutter. The lieutenant, and they assure him none of us have cut anything off, and then Polly goes, well, other than our hair,
Ah. Ooh. Ooh.
because women have long hair. Hav, I don't know what you're thinking there.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Well, don't talk to Sinead O'Connor about that.
Well,
So
anywho,
there's that.
so it was a nice callback for Terry Pratchett, one of my favorite authors who's dead.
That you've now mentioned twice in one podcast, which is cool.
But it
That it's good
they were
organically.
They were both. It came up from both of these stories.
So you said these didn't have anything in common. Boom.
Yeah, they both had Terry Pratchett connections.
They did. Speaking of the Amazons, at the very end of this arc, you find out that Yorick's sister.
At the very end of this arc, we find out that Yorick's sister is an Amazon.
Yes, correct. And then you're kind of like, okay, they're eventually going to meet. How's that going to go?
Yeah.
When she finds out that the one guy alive is her bro.
You know how it goes, Hav? Not great. It doesn't
No.
go great.
No, I bet not.
So not only do you find that out, what you really find out is that the Amazons aren't this thing that just came out of nowhere. There's a cult leader. I mean, it is completely, totally, absolutely a cult. And it has a cult leader taking advantage of people in a dangerous, emotional, stressful time. So,
No, that hasn't happened recently, has it?
no, I wasn't making an implication on that. I was just saying that this
Oh.
is purely cult leader stuff,
Yeah.
based on the way the woman that's the cult leader was written,
Okay. I'm just saying,
including making Hero kill a girl.
yeah, that was
Kill
rough.
her or kill yourself.
Yeah.
Should have shot the lady. Here's the thing. If someone hands you a gun and says, kill this defenseless person or kill yourself, your best bet is just to kill that person. That's
Kill the really, really bad person
yeah, kill the
that
person
gave you.
telling you to do that. Kill defenseless person or kill yourself. I choose option 3.
Yeah.
Don't kill anybody, folks. I just lectured my sister and my nephew about not killing people earlier today, and I said I'm not a violent person, and I did say violence was only sometimes the answer. So,
Good. Hey, so to go back real fast, after the White House, that's when they go to Boston to find the doctor? That's the expert?
that is correct. They
Okay.
decide that they have to find a geneticist who we've met earlier because she is pregnant in a hospital the night that all the men die.
And she's pregnant with the baby.
Yes.
And
the baby, she says, is her clone, actually her brother's clone. Actually, the clone of, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's the clone of her brother's child who has leukemia and they can't find a donor for. And it's a boy child. And she believes that her cloning, because it happened right as it was going on, is what caused everyone to die.
right when the baby's born, like the prematurely, the doctor or whoever, or the nurse, the male
The doctor.
medical
Yeah, the
doctor
doctor,
that's there dies, like bleeding out of his eyes
Yeah.
and ears, dies.
So she's convinced that it's her that does it. When they find her in Boston, they finally find her, and they say, "What are you doing?" And she says, "I'm looking for a cure for breast cancer." And 355 says, "Isn't a little late for that?" And she says, "Well, if this is it, we should at least die. We should at least end without having that hanging over us, or something along that lines." It wasn't. It was actually a pretty good justification for it, but they were like, "Well, you got to start cloning again," and that's when
Right.
they introduce her to Yorick and the monkey, and she gets really, really excited about the monkey, much to Yorick's chagrin.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
that.
It's like, I'm right here. You're excited
I'm
about
the
the
man.
freaking monkey? Well, and speaking of, her turning that page and going to cancer research right after the ill-fated birth of the clone baby, why wouldn't she? Is there any explanation? And maybe spoiler, and tell me if this is a big spoiler. Is there any explanation why she didn't just dive back in and try to figure out, was it the baby born, and if so, why? And can we clone men somehow and make men by cloning them, or try to?
They don't know what killed the men at this point. It
Okay.
was not her baby, her female baby that was a clone of her. She was cloning herself.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it was. She did not clone a baby boy.
Okay.
Her reasoning to not do that is she'd be afraid if she did that. She said, "I'd kill all the women the next time," but she did not kill it. I mean, I can spoil the whole thing for you and tell you what happened.
Okay, everybody that doesn't want to know the ending, you better stop listening now.
I'm not going.
Or you can just
I'm,
tell me. You
I'm
can just tell me
gonna,
afterwards.
Yeah, well, no, you're going to read it all. You said you were going to finish reading it.
I say lots of things.
Yeah,
Come
well,
on.
you have
Come
to.
on.
You have to finish reading it in order to know. So no, I'm
It's
not. Gonna,
60,
Dude, I liked
60
this.
issues.
I liked it. Is it
you
10
you
issues?
just pointed
I just
60 issues. You just pointed out some pretty big. They're not plot holes. They're just plot problems with the whole society going down the drain in zero point 0.0 seconds when all the dudes die. I'm sorry, that was a really good plot problem.
Yeah.
Like the phone's going dead, like that. That was interesting. But no, it is. That all said, yes. After getting done with this, you want to know more and you want to see where it goes.
And it's worth it. Every volume is good. Like I said, I have problems with it, but I mean, that's the whole fun about doing something like this is we can nitpick things we like. I mean, good Lord.
We just nitpicked the hell out of Star Wars,
Yes,
and
we
I
did.
think
I mean, that's
self-admittedly,
all we did. That is all we did about Star Wars. A thing that the two of us love more than we love our own children, mainly because neither one of us has any children.
there's
and that
that.
would be the only reason we would love Star Wars more. I don't love Star Wars more than I love my niece and nephews.
My nieces and goddaughter. No, I don't. I don't love Star Wars more than them, or my wife, or my family and friends. But I do. I do like Star Wars a whole bunch. That said, funny you mentioned Star Wars because today is the 55th anniversary of Star Trek's debut on the U.S. airwaves.
Really?
Did you know that?
I did not know that.
And I'm one of those weirdos in sci-fi fandom. I like each of them equally. I'm not going to pick one because you can't make me.
You know
I
what?
like both Star Wars and Star Trek.
You know what I watched while I was eating dinner before we got on this podcast? Part of the reason why we were late?
What?
Episode of Star Trek Voyager.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I watched that while waiting to start this. I decided, you know what? Let me watch that first episode where No Man Has Gone Before that aired 55 years ago today. So I did. It was cool.
Yes. The nerd is strong in both of us.
Yeah, a little bit. Hey, speaking of nerd and strong in both of us, you were mentioning, we're talking about this thing that killed all the men. There was that movie, and I have no idea if it was based on a book or any other piece of literature or type of non, if it was based on something. Children of Men. Do you remember that movie where there hadn't been a child born in years? Julianne Moore is in it. I swear it's not Children of Men. That's another. I'm just thinking of this.
Welcome to our reoccurring segment, Hav Types. Hav Types, brought to you by the Public Library.
Yeah, okay, yeah, 2006 sci-fi action thriller. Yeah, boom. I wasn't wrong about the title. I thought I was. Clive Owen, Julianne Moore. So the basic plot is it's been 18 years since there's been total human infertility.
From the COVID vaccine.
Well, that or from injecting horse dewormer. Maybe that too. I don't know. Anyways, for some reason that just made me think of that because I don't know why. I made that was a weird tangent. You can just cut all this out.
Oh, I would not do that for the life of me. We'd miss the whole segment of Hav typing.
That is one of the funs.
This is why the library gives me all this free material.
Exactly. That's the only reason.
For those kind of, you just can't pay for the kind of. I think we have upwards of 20 people listening to this podcast. The library needs this advertising.
Right, because nobody's heard of the public library in whatever municipality they're living in.
Quite bluntly, I will say, based on the percentage of the people that I know are listening to or participating in this that I have gotten to join the library since this started, it's a high percentage. So my outreach is really good. If that were an actual thing that they were doing it, I could say, well, look, I got Hav to get a library card. I got Marco to get a library card. Who knows? Somebody else out there that's listening might have gone and gotten a library card because they listened to this. And if they have, they should email us at havencharlestalkcomics@gmail.com, and we'll talk about it, how they got a
E-
library card because of this
exactly.
podcast. And maybe they'll let us get more than 10 DVDs at a time.
Maybe. Probably not, though. I'm going to bet no.
I found out that I could only get only check out 10 DVDs at a time when I had AT&T internet, and they started putting a bandwidth cap because all I did was streaming. I'd canceled cable, so I was streaming, and all of a sudden I was getting $20 extra a month on my bill, and I called them, and they're like, "Oh, well, you're just using too much," and I was like, "Oh, well, I stream," and they were like, well, you must be streaming in HD. And I'm like, yes, I'm streaming in HD. I mean, they were aghast at in HD. So I was checking out, I was like, fine. So I went to the library. I was getting DVDs of TV shows and I ran up against the cap limit. And I'm like, son of a.
You're just being thwarted at every turn.
Yeah. Everybody wants to limit my consumption of mass media. Look,
what did they expect you to stream in? Like, is there a setting somewhere that we don't know about that says, I want to stream in 1955 black and white, please?
Well, you can stream in standard definition. You can set on your device whatever you're using to stream with that you do standard definition. So it's not pulling as much bandwidth. But the whole idea of throttling anyway or charging me more for extra is such a BS thing just to make more money.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's like when they used to charge for minutes.
Yes. It is just a game. They know it's a game. They know they can get more money, and they know they can convince a group of people that it's good to charge people that why they're using more. They should pay more. You're not paying for the amount you take through. You're paying for the pipe. Sucking on that pipe harder does not hurt anybody else. I just like saying sucking on that pipe harder.
It's a profit thing, Charles.
I am well aware of how corporate America works. Thank you very much. It's the same reason why I can't get fiber from AT&T here, and I can get Spectrum's crappy version of cable internet, and I really can't seem to find any other high-speed internet, and in Europe they pay a shit ton less for a lot faster service. USA.
Of course they do.
USA. Okay, sorry. Wow.
Love it or leave it. These colors don't run.
I told you and that was our minute of politics.
Well, I started to go down that rabbit trail about cult leaders and stuff, I put the brake. You said hold on third. Don't go to home there. Just don't try to make a triple into a home run there. Why don't you just stop there? I think everybody knew where I was going, so we're just going to leave it at that. I did want to point out, you did mention this is by Brian K. Vaughan,
yes,
the writer.
And by the way, if you'll notice what you suggested I read for the next time, Saga is also by Brian K. Vaughan.
I was going to point that out.
I figured you were. That's why I jumped the gun and slid it in there under you. You
got me. You stole my thunder. How dare you attack me? Okay. And the penciler on this is Pia Guerra. And then you had some beautiful covers that I saw when I looked up this comic book, painted covers too. A lot of them by, I believe, J.G. Jones.
Okay.
And they're really cool.
The covers are incredible.
Really cool painted covers that you don't see very many painted covers. I mean, you have to go back to like Gold Key covers of like Dr. Solar and Turok and stuff like that to see painted covers. And these are, of course, different and cool and modern and just really cool. So
yeah, I would like to point out one of the things, like when you look at those painted covers, when they draw Yorick on the covers, he does not look anything like what he looks like in the comic. And what he looks like in the comic, for anybody, I will tell you exactly who there's no way they were not doing this on purpose. And I'm going to read the panel that proves it. They're drawing Peter Parker. Yorick is Peter Parker. And if you read enough Spider-Man, you cannot look at him and go, oh, holy crap, that's Peter Parker. Especially since when you first are introduced to him, he's hanging upside down in a straitjacket. And it is Peter Parker.
Okay. See, This is why this is fun. You point out stuff like this.
Here is the panel. I don't know if it was in the first arc or if it's later, but I immediately recognizing him as Peter Parker, and this is the tell too. At one point he's saying, don't get me wrong, I still want to do whatever I can to help, but my motto has always been, with little power comes little responsibility.
Boom, shalakalaka. There you go. All right.
And just on a personal note, you've heard me say to Jeff on occasion, I want you to diagram that sentence when he says something, right?
Yeah.
Okay. This is an exchange. Because of Israel's women, I now have many banging artillery to use on anyone who might brought trouble in. And York responds,
Yeah.
man, I would love to diagram that sentence. That guy,
Yeah.
that one was a personal. I got a kick out of that one just because of sometimes when he goes off, I'm like, I want you to diagram that sentence.
That no, I was that in this 6 issue
No,
arc?
neither one of those two panels
Okay.
I just read
Okay.
what we read.
Because
That was just 'cause
she had an oddly worded. That same character had an
no,
oddly
the
worded.
one I read is not in that. This is from
Okay.
a Russian woman that you'll meet later.
Okay. Well, then the character from
The Israeli woman?
is it Israeli woman?
Uh-huh.
She has an oddly worded sentence or dialogue that is just weirdly worded, where you could say the same thing, and it's later on in the issue. I don't know. I was thinking of that character when you were mentioning that.
Okay, yeah, no. Well, she was referring. There's a Russian woman who was referring to them. Like I said, every volume of this is fun, and it really flows because it truly is a journey. In fairness, this is their journey across the country to her. We didn't get to that point. They meet the doctor. She's all aflutter about the monkey. She says, I have to get a blood test. And York is trying to say, whoa, 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 he no likey the needles. And the window is open and out goes the monkey. And he's like, son, the last time it took me 3 hours to catch him. And then you see a scene 4 hours later. I can't believe it took us this long to catch this. One of the first beginning scenes, you meet a woman in Israel firing rubber bullets at a group of Palestinian youths throwing rocks. And she turns out to be she ends up, after all the men die, as basically the leader of the Israeli military. And she is called by someone to come to the U.S. because there's a man alive. They get there right after they go off to chase the monkey out in Boston.
And she is hardcore.
Oh, yes. She's very hardcore. So when they get back towards the lab, it's on fire. The Israelis have burned it to the ground. They think they've run because they heard them coming, which instead they were chasing their monkey, and the lab is being burned to the ground. And that's
Right.
when they decide that they have to go across the country to San Francisco, where her secondary lab is, where she has all of the genetic material, the backup genetic material she's going to need to continue her studies, to try to figure out why all men are dead and can we bring men back.
And of course, it has to be across the country in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Because,
Boston
plot.
and well, yeah, you got to have a reason to keep this going, and
Right.
and,
And-
have things go on. And that,
And the Israeli, she's named Alter, correct?
well, we don't know what it is. She
I
goes
wanna
by
say-
Alter. She does
Right,
not know
right.
her first name.
And they
Because
give the
they're-
story why that is.
Yes, there is an old belief that if they don't know your name, God, the angel of death cannot find you. And her parents did not tell her name because she had lost siblings, and they did not want them to die either. Her to die as well. So she does not know her own name. She has said that you can call me Alter.
Yeah. Yeah, and so they when we leave them, they're going to start their trek to San Francisco, correct?
That is correct.
And then I think right after that, you find out that Yorick's sister hero is an Amazon, and it's right close. I swear it's all in that last issue.
I don't remember exactly when
Okay,
it is.
well,
Well, I'm
anyways.
not, it could be. I thought it happened a little sooner than that, but
maybe it
because
did.
I think it happens right after they get the motorcycles.
No, you're right. It happens the issue before.
Yeah.
You find out about York's right before all that. All those hijinks ensue.
But yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I said how much I liked this before I even suggested it to you because I enjoyed the hell out of this.
Well, you're not the only one that liked it. The little bit of quote unquote research Googling I did on this, it won multiple Eisner Awards.
It makes sense to me.
And
It was brilliant, even if it is incredibly sexist for a world run by women.
Okay, well, there's that.
Sorry.
It was published by Vertigo, which
Okay.
is an imprint for DC that's no longer. Is it around, or do they bring back Vertigo? I don't even know. I don't pick
I,
up monthlies.
I don't know. I don't pay attention to publishers or artists. There's a list of
Okay.
things I don't pay attention to.
Well, okay. Well, I was going to say
The
when the
art
month
comment was back to last podcast, my comments last podcast, but I don't really pay that much attention to the publishers.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of art, these covers are really cool. And back in 2002, 3, when this was coming out monthly, I was picking up monthlies still. And I'm pretty sure issue number 15, which is just, I think, an iconic cover. It's the one that has the guy in the astronaut suit with the visor halfway up and there's a skull in it. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
I think I picked that up just because of the cover. I was like, okay, I got to pick this comic book up because of that freaking cover. What is going on here? And then I think I read it and it was like, okay, the first 6 issues are collected in a trade already. Let me get that, and that's why I got this thing.
Okay. Okay. I see that.
So, and I have like the first 2, I think, which will take me through issue 12.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I forget. I have a few of these somewhere, the floppies, and then some of the trade paperbacks. So just a little history of me. That cover, when I was scrolling through the covers, I was like, I'm pretty darn sure when I saw that on the rack, I was like, nope, gonna buy it because of the cover, because that's how I roll. So there's that. So this is the part in the show where the podcast show thing where I'm going to talk about themes, Charles.
Okay.
You were saying that these don't have anything to really in common.
I was just kind of playing around, but yes.
No, but you did point out the Terry Pratchett connection, which I thought was freaking cool. That there is that connection. Though the one theme that I came up with, the one theme was Outsiders. You got Doom
I've never
Patrol.
seen that movie.
And I was not talking about the movie, but thank you for cracking me up. Oh, that was good. Thank you. I needed that. No, just that, Doom Patrol, of course, misfits, outsiders, don't fit into society because the way their powers have affected them, it's so beyond. It's not like they look like Jean Grey walking around. You would, unless you saw her use her telekinesis, you would know she was a mutant. Robot Man is a little robot walking around. Crazy Jane, at any given point, when she manifests certain personalities, she changes physically and has 60-something odd personalities. You got Negative Man, who's wrapped in bandages and then has a negative spirit floating around, for example. So they're outsiders. And then I was going to say York is now the ultimate outsider because he's the only dude, as far as he knows at this point in time, besides Ampersand, his pet monkey, or monkey that he was training to be a service animal.
But what with being the last man, he could be an insider. Wordplay.
Done. I was going to say you're better than that, but
No.
No.
No, I'm not better than that. No, there's no way. No.
That was,
No,
you know what? You know what?
is-
I take that back. That was pretty darn good. I take that back. I'm just upset I didn't think of that joke somehow instead of you. That was my only takeaway.
Really?
That
Maybe I am better than that.
I love bad jokes. You know that.
Well, I know, but that you're disappointed that you didn't think of it. I should be better than that. I do have a theme for Why the Last Man. I agree with your theme on Outsiders on that. And I can see how he's kind of an outsider. He's definitely an outcast at this point because he never knows which one's going to kill him or what's going to happen. And that's kind of the fun throughout all this, is the reaction when people do find out he's alive. The main theme from Why the Last Man, at least from what I took from this, is that the patriarchy is absolutely mandatory to be in effect or society will collapse.
Of course. As we see in these first 6 issues, or the flip side is, guess what? Maybe matriarchy wouldn't be all that much better.
Well, I think that's
maybe people are shitty.
I think that's they're trying to say that, except they don't have anything they can go on because the majority of look, there are very bad women. There are, but we've tried something one way for so long. The idea that, surely if we tried it the other way, it would be the exact same. Well, no, nothing's the exact same. And I don't buy that. I it's just, it bugged me when I first started reading it. I'm going to be very curious. And again, this is with me saying I love this comic book. I've read it all. It was awesome. It was a great comic book. I have trouble with some of what it was because it's almost all bad. No one handles it well.
Well, you've talked about stuff being dated before that we've read.
Uh-huh.
For example, when
But
we read the
I don't
Eternals.
want something that came out when I was in my late 20s to be this dated.
That's what I was just going to point out. We're talking about this that debuted a year after 9/11, September of 2002, and ended in 2008. I'm looking it up now and just looked it up. But you're right. It is 20 years ago.
Well,
Pushing 20.
It started almost 20 years ago, but it ended 12 years ago. Anyway, but
So
that was all. That is my one major negative on it. Is it looked like nobody. There were no women in this comic book world, because when he starts his march, he said when he gets to DC, he said it was 2 months later. That's some time for some people to step up and do some things. And this idea that basically from what we can see is they're going around, no one's really stepped up to do some things. There's some stuff going on, but come on. They can't figure out how to get power to people. They can't figure out how to move food. They can't figure out how to clear traffic jams out of the way. I don't know how to run a tow truck. I could figure it out.
you're right. That's right. They
And it's not
Yeah.
because I have a penis. My penis doesn't magically make me know how to use a tow truck, but I could figure it out.
Good point.
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing.
I mean, my penis is magic.
Okay. It's twice. It's twice you got me, Junior. Okay. Anything else about why The Last Man?
No, I think I've torn down something I like a lot too much.
You really have. You usually reserve this type of critical analysis for stuff I recommend.
Hey.
And in fact, you did a 180 on Doom Patrol from your
In the
first
middle of
take on
yeah.
it.
I did. Well, sometimes I got deeper. It got deeper to me, and I, like I said, I may go back and I may read all of his run on it because of looking at it through a new lens. And sometimes when you open it for a new lens, and that might be what's going on with me with Why the Last Man, is I thought
Yeah.
about that the first time when I read it, but I was really loving it, so I read the whole thing, and then I started reading it again, and I'm like, okay, come on now. So I think that might have something to be said for it, looking at it in a new way as you read something.
I think you're absolutely right. Well, speaking of going back to Doom Patrol, what I think I'm going to do is go back and start with issue 1 of this second volume and read the first 1 through 18. Get back to the
So
seeing where the whole thing
lost
goes.
you. We lost you there.
Okay.
So you
No,
go back and reread 1 through 18.
Of volume 2 that comes right before of the Doom Patrol 4-issue arc that we read,
Okay.
and then keep on going with the Grant Morrison run
Okay.
for the rest of his tenure, their
Okay.
tenure. So yeah. And look, I don't think I'm done with Why the Last Man either.
Okay.
There's just more and more in the to be read pile.
I got you. And I'm gonna add to it because fortunately, what I chose, and we're kind of up against the 8 ball here, because this is Wednesday, and this episode drops Friday of the next week.
Right.
So that means we only have a few weeks to, and we have at the most 2 weeks to read the next stuff before we get in, because I do have to have some editing time to edit around my schedule. I want you to read something that's kind of long,
Okay.
and it's going.
Well,
to,
it's just picture books. I mean,
Yeah,
it can't take
well-
that long.
Well, it can't take that long for me, but you're not a strong reader, as you've said more than once.
I do take my time sometimes. Okay, what is
So
it?
that's fine.
Drop it on.
It is Spider Island.
I got nothing.
Spider-Man.
Spider Island.
Spider Island. Spider-Man Spider Island. It is. I checked it yesterday. It is on Hoopla. It is when New York is being turned into spiders. It starts with everyone getting spider powers in New York. and it's Spider-Man fighting it, and it's fun, comic booky fun. It's an event. It's a big event. Spider Island.
Is it 616? Is
It's
this
616. Yeah, it is the main timeline. Dan Slott wrote
okay?
it. Best Spider-Man writer in the 616.
That's a bold statement.
It is. It is, especially
Okay.
since a lot of people don't like him, and those people are
I,
wrong.
I've noticed that on the Twitter.
And
There is some vehement dislike of Mr. Slott.
and they are incorrect.
You like him better than Bendis on the Ultimate Spider-Man?
I said in the 616. I chose my words carefully. Were you not listening?
Oh, I'm not a good listener.
Yeah, no, I said he is the best Spider-Man writer in the 616.
Gotcha.
They are too different for me to compare and contrast the two things, because Bendis was writing a completely different Spider-Man in a completely different universe. And I know that sounds like a cop-out to say, because I love Bendis. He was not dealing with the backstory the way Slott was. He was not dealing with... He got to play in his own little sandbox, and he played wonderfully. And he invented Miles Morales, which was incredible. But Slott had to work with everything that came before.
And help me out, and maybe those that I was not a big Spider-Man reader. Is this before or after they did away with the marriage of
This
Mary
is after.
Jane and Peter?
This
Okay.
is after. Yeah, this is after A Brand New Day.
Okay. And was that Dan Slott?
No. Dan Slott
Okay,
started
I didn't think so.
right around the time when he didn't... Well, that was... the writers didn't decide to do that. Dan
That was
Slott,
editorial.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was He Who Shall Not Be Named, because I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. It's nothing to do with
Is it Joe Quesada?
It may be, yes.
Was he in charge back? I don't know.
I think
Anyways,
so. I think you're correct. That's the name I think I was looking for, but I'm not married to that. What I believe, and again, I'm not a historian on this stuff. But the books I've read go way before this about comic book stuff. But if I remember correctly, Dan Slott started writing not as like the main writer, but they had a number of writers, and he was writing books within once they started A Brand New Day. So he started writing that, and then he eventually took over and was the writer of Amazing. And then I can't remember when they just went to... There have been lots of different Spider-Man comics, and I'm making finger quotes for Hav, and all of you at home, I have to tell you. There have been a number of different lies. We talked about last week the Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man that became Spectacular Web of Spider-Man, blah, blah, blah. Amazing, those were the three. Those Spectacular Web and Amazing were the three that I read as a kid.
those were the big three. Well, there was Marvel. He was a Marvel team up too for a long time.
And I would pick that up too. But that was it was it was a Spider-Man comic. I would read. I have a bunch of those, and I also had the Marvel Tales, which was old Spider-Man reprints.
Right.
So you pulled me off sides talking Spider-Man. Where was I?
Dan Slott, where he comes in.
And then they basically there's just one title. It's Amazing. And instead of having three different Spider-Man comics, they have just Amazing 3 times. So it's publishing Amazing publishes almost weekly. I think it's 3 out of 4 weeks a month. There's a Spider-Man comic, which is awesome. And they decided, and this is kind of when I started picking back up. I went for a short run. Not long after I moved into my place, I started picking up just Amazing Spider-Man, actual reading. I got a stack of them. And I bought a bunch of the pre-issues, and then I went through, and it was great to have a new comic every week. And I was like, okay, this is cool. And then I stopped doing that and got Marvel Unlimited because that's awesome.
Yeah, but it's still kind of wonky sometimes. The Marvel Unlimited. It's hard to find stuff sometimes that you would think would be really easy to find on it. Have you found that to be true? Like when you're trying to search for a specific arc? Okay, maybe it's just that I'm not...
No, searching for a specific arc can be difficult. What you have to do is you have to find where that arc is online and Google that and then just read those issues. Because they don't do it...
Yeah.
They do... It is so much better than DC's.
Maybe I'm confusing the two. One of them I
Because
just remember
DC
having a heck of
is
a time
yeah,
finding stuff. Oh, it's
DC is
DC.
almost impossible to do anything. And you know why I haven't gotten it? Because they charge more than Marvel. Because I was gonna get it because you were like, no, it's like this much money, and I went on, it's more than Marvel, and I'm like, you know what, you don't have as much on there yet, and it's impossible to use, so hard pass.
There you go.
Yeah, that
Okay, so Spider Island from Amazing Spider-Man. Then is it from Amazing Spider-Man back then?
I believe it was amazing. Yeah,
Okay,
there's some venom in it. I'm telling you, go to Hoopla and just download the
collection.
Spider Island collection. That's what we'll do. It'll be that arc. And because there's some Venom in there too, because Venom took part in it, and I remember really enjoying this. So we'll read it, and if you like it, I'll be happy. If you don't like it, I'll still be happy, but I'll make fun of you.
Sure,
I'm just
sure.
setting the parameters for
No,
our next podcast.
I like event books, so that going into it, I'm kind of psyched about it.
Yeah, no, it was a fun event that I'm sure tons and tons of people hated. But I don't read about things like that because you do, I don't, because I just don't care about other people's opinions. Wait, that sounds uncool. I don't care if somebody
you're
hates
so
something
cool,
I like.
Charles.
No, I'm not. No. Oh God, no. Oh God, no. Having a podcast is not cool, Hav. No matter what that damn poll I put on Twitter that time said.
It's true.
Hav,
I think 3 people said it was.
yeah, well, that's the majority of people responding to the poll said yes, having a comic book podcast is cool. And people have responded to me when I've told real life people, hey, I have a comic book podcast. They go, that's cool. I'm like, no, it's not.
And then you ask them, "Well, have you listened?" And they're like, "Hey, so how you been?"
Well, that's the other thing. People will at times sometimes call me a nerd, and they don't like the reaction they get because the reaction is, well, yeah, I have a comic book podcast.
There you go. There you go. What was I going to say? Well, speaking of the island thing, I was just remembering an Uncanny X-Men arc that Spider-Man's in from the mid '80s that has to do with the island being taken over by a bad wizard, not Doctor Strange. Did you ever read that?
I don't think so.
It's smack dab in the '80s, and I'll look it up. But that's for another time because I'm sticking with my suggestion that I said I was going to suggest we read because.
Yeah, we're doing Saga.
I've never read it.
I know.
I just know enough about it that it is Brian Vaughan. Brian got it. I've heard
Okay.
nothing but good things about it, and we're losing it right at the end.
Yeah. No, you've been gone for a while.
Okay, so but my suggestion is Saga because I've heard nothing but good things about it on comic book Twitter for way, way too long. I want to say it's been out since the early 2010s and for a while. And now it's on a hiatus of some type.
Okay, so I want to talk about this real quick because for those of you listening at home or on the road or wherever you listen to this podcast, thank you for listening. I was over at Hav's house on Friday, and we were sitting in his living room on his very nice redone new home. It's not a new home; it's his old home that he just had some light remodeling done. It looks very nice.
Thank you.
They did a good job, and then we're talking about what we always talk about, comic books. And I look over where he has some comic books, and he has a shit ton of Saga comics. And I said, "Oh, so you've already read it?" He's like, I haven't read that." So he has dropped like $1,000 on Saga comic books, because I mean they're these fancy hardbound, leather bound. Actually, I'm sorry, they're just trades. But still, I'm like, wait, what?
eBay is dangerous because guess what? I think those retailed for something crazy per. Yeah, I think there's 3. I know there's 3 volumes that I have. I think I said, you know what? I forget what I bid. It was 10, 15, $20 a piece. And I thought, you know what? Cover price was something outrageously way more than that. And I was like, that's not. If I get it, I doubt I'm going to get it. I'm going to make my top bid X. And then I won. And then I haven't read them. So there's that.
I will tell you, when I first got into, I talked about getting back into reading comic books from the library, and one of the first things I got back into reading comic books was Ultimate Spider-Man. Really got me into it, and the way I got that was from Amazon's used book section. Not Amazon, because buying them from Amazon, man, you got to pay full price. Mm-hmm. But I could find them. I looked up like Volume 1, and I think I found it with like slight problems, used bookstore,
Right.
for like $2. Well, I had to pay $3.95 to get it, but I could get, or $2.95 is shipping and handling that you had to pay shipping. The shipping and handling on a lot of these were more than both. I bought two of them from the same bookseller, and they would have come book rate. But I will give, and if I knew the name of the used bookstore that did this, I would call them out because they were wonderful. They realized that I had bought these two volumes from them, and I had to pay on each volume because it wouldn't pair. So you buy this one, you pay X amount shipping and handling. You buy this one, you pay X amount shipping and handling. So instead of sending it the book rate the way they would normally, they overnighted those two to me. And I was like,
Nice.
that was one of the coolest. That's small mom and pop type store business because they're like, dude, we're sending this to this guy. He paid us this much money. Hey, we'll still pocket some money, and we can just overnight this thing to him. He get it. I got it second day or so. I don't think it was overnighted, but you know what I mean. It was just,
Yeah.
should have taken a week, and it was there. I was like, oh my gosh. It kind of sucked because it was book 2 and 3, and I had to wait on book 1, and I'm like, dang it.
No, I hear you. No, so I do remember this getting the saga, I think last year sometime, because again I had read so much about it, and then saw that the first so many issues were collected in these nice hardcovers that I looked on eBay, and I looked it up just now. The cover price, brand new for these hardcovers each, was $50, and I think they were for up for auction, and I think I put in a bid for like $10 or $15 each, thinking somebody's going to outbid me.
Yeah.
Whoops. My
You
bad.
put how much in for
I
each?
think 10 or $15 each.
Oh, okay. That's still, you should have gone less, but
Yeah, but I was like,
hey, that's fine.
I kind of wanted them,
Yeah.
and I do hate when I make a bid and somebody outbids me by like $2 or $3. I was like,
Okay.
son
You're
of a
like, just
gun.
I'll pay what
If, what I think it's worth.
this is how much I'm willing to pay for this. That's it.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I really wanted it is I had leafed through at Barnes & Noble a giant tome hardcover thing that Barnes & Noble wanted $50 for. And I would go, when I was at Barnes & Noble, buying other books. And again, this was back before I realized the public library was so awesome again. I realized that this looked amazing, and I really wanted to read it, but I could not bring myself to pay $50 for a hard-covered comic book, especially since me reading it was going to destroy the. I mean, it's so. I mean, it would have been so unwielding to read.
Yep.
I love the comic books on my iPad. I just love it.
You know what? Here's the thing. I have an iPad Mini. Do you have a full size iPad?
I used to have a mini, and I read comic books. I have a regular one now.
I'm this close to getting a Chromebook.
Okay.
And one of the reasons, in one of those flippable open kind of, because the Chromebooks are kind of smaller, and they're anyway, Rabbit Trail, whatever. They're incredibly affordable. You get a Chromebook for sure refurbished for $100, $200, but even some of the new ones are less than $300.
Okay.
And they can be touchscreen, and you can flip them open and use them like a pad, like an iPad. Anyways, or I'm just going to get a full-sized iPad because the mini is just a little too small to. It's just a little frustrating to read the comic books on it, quite frankly, for me.
Okay.
I still do it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. No. Are you trying to read the full page on the thing at a time?
No.
So it goes small and.
Well, because sometimes I want to see the whole page,
Well, yeah,
and
you can
then I'll
open it
double.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I get into the frame by frame. I'll click it and get into the frame by frame thing, which is a cool aspect of it.
Yeah.
Which is very cool. But yeah, so Saga.
It was better when I got it was sad when my mini died. When my second mini died, I got, because I was pricing and I could get at Costco for about the same price as a new mini. I could get the just iPad. It's not an iPad Pro. It's just the Costco lower end iPad. They don't have the mini. They have this, and it's bigger, and I do like it better.
Okay.
Because it's also, I don't know if you've noticed, I have very large hands.
You're just trying to brag now, but
No,
go ahead.
I just have big hands, and I can still. It's not so big that I can't wield it with one hand.
I gotcha.
So I can still use it like I did my mini, because my mini to me was like a big phone.
Yeah.
Because I could really, this one I can palm, but it's a stretch, but it does increase the size of it more. You can also, by the way, landscape when you're doing it.
I've
And
tried.
it'll make
I've,
it when you're doing the page by page sometimes better. And sometimes depending on what you're reading a comic book on, they don't work as great. I have noticed that the DC one, again, the DC app sucks.
ha,
They're just trying to say we want Marvel to be better, and I'm like, dude, I've watched the Marvel app get better. I've not watched the DC app get better. So
it's almost like they're not trying very hard at some
yeah,
stuff.
because they're not.
Oh
All
well.
right. I think we've mentioned the email that y'all should send us emails to. Hav has promised to send you, no matter how old you are, a beer if you send us an email.
That's right.
Um, he's,
Through the U.S., I'm just going to violate all sorts of interstate laws if you live out of state too. By the way,
he's going to mail you a beer. What he doesn't mean, what he really means is he's going to soak an envelope in beer and mail it to you.
or I'm just going to find Drizzly or what other liquor beer delivery service in your burg, and just get it sent to you maybe.
He's going to send you a comic book. He said he really wants someone other than me to tell him something about comics. So please let Hav know something about comic books other than someone other than me. Talk to Hav about comic books, and it's Hav and Charles Talk Comics at gmail.com. And we both have our Twitter. Hav is
I'm
Hav Gonzo Tweets.
Correct. And you're at Herring Red Reel, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And what is our unpaid intern tweet as?
J and spelled out, so JANDC Talk Comics. That's our Twitter handle for the podcast, where the unpaid intern just throws shade all over us, mostly me.
Yeah, he's kind of a dick.
Kinda.
I
Kind
like
of
it.
a big dick.
He works for free,
Yeah, he does.
so he's paid in Hav's tears. I'm paid in Hav's laughter.
Which is plentiful on both counts.
He makes more than I do.
Hey, to everybody that has tuned in again, once again, for episode 9 of the podcast, thank you so much for listening. I'll speak for Charles on this one. We really do appreciate it.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Thank you very much. Y'all have a great whatever you're doing for the rest of the day you're doing it on.
Bye, Charles.
Bye, Hav.